or suggestions by the minority that the Akufo-Addo administration has borrowed about 80 billion Ghana cedis and has nothing to show for it. Now, the administration's attention is drawn to this suggestion that about 80 billion Ghana cedis has been borrowed, and there's not much to show for it. From the onset, if you pay attention to the statement that was put out by the minority, the first two paragraphs refer to an increase of 80 billion Ghana cedis in new loans in the last 2.5 years alone by President Akufo-Addo, raising the debt-to-GDP ratio from 56% to 58%. We want to start by stating emphatically that government has not borrowed 80 billion Ghana cedis in 2.5 years. Ghana's domestic market can never even raise that kind of money in 2.5 years. Our market is not as liquid as that. A strange kind of assertion that is being made must first be examined by the fact that even if you claim 80 billion has been borrowed in 2.5 years, does the market have what it takes to even raise 80 billion Ghana cedis in 2.5 years? The answer is no. Now, with regards to external loans, all of those loans are given approvals by Parliament in accordance with Article 181 of the Constitution 1992 and Sections 55, 56, 57 of the Public Financial Management Act, Act 921, for which the minority is party. And you can add up all the loans that this administration has taken to Parliament, and it will not come anywhere near 80 billion. Indeed, if there was a list of loans that add up to 80 billion, you'd imagine that the minority would put out that list by now. But the reason for which our debt stock today will show a difference of about 80 billion is that the figure is a nominal public debt stock figure. And the public debt stock figure is made up of a number of things. Number one, old loans that are now being disbursed within the tenure of this administration add to the public debt stock. It doesn't mean that the administration has gone to borrow money. And I'll give you an example. If you take, for example, the railway works going on between Tema and Pakadang, which is financed by an Indian Exim facility, every new $1 that they release is added to our debt stock. Did the Akufo-Addo administration borrow that money? No. So you cannot look at the growth in debt stock and say, therefore, that the administration has borrowed 80 billion. It's an argument you can't sustain. The first addition to old loans, or the first addition to the debt stock, are old loans that are now being disbursed, and there's quite a number of them. Second is that the exchange rate has an impact on the nominal public debt stock figure. So, for example, if a year ago a dollar was 4 cedis and we owed $1 billion, in cedi terms, it will be 4 billion cedis. If a year down the line, the dollar is 5 cedis, just the mere shift of the exchange rate will now move the public debt stock figure from 4 billion cedis to 5 billion cedis. Does that mean that the government has gone to borrow? No, it doesn't. Number three, you would notice that since 2017, we've had a number of extraordinary events that the administration has had to borrow specifically to deal with. The bailout of the financial services sector alone has already cost us some 12 billion Ghana cedis, and if you add what is outstanding to be done, the figure may even go up a bit higher than that. Who superintended that exercise? It does not necessarily mean that the government has gone to borrow money and therefore must show some infrastructure projects for it. Again, while we're going through all of these IMF reviews and successfully being passed out, it came with attendant funds. I'll give you a breakdown of the funds. For example, if you use the whole ballpark figure of about close to $1 billion under the IMF program, you'll notice that that, for example, is about, in current cedi terms, about 5 billion cedis. But that IMF money that came in went to the central bank for balance of payment support. It doesn't come to the treasury. It doesn't come to the fiscal account, or it doesn't come to the government to use for infrastructure projects to show you that that $1 billion or that 5 billion cedis can be pointed to in that project or not. And then you come to new commercial loans that may be contracted by the administration. And anybody who has read our budget knows that during the IMF program, we had a cap that we cannot borrow more than $500 million a year on commercial loans. The IMF is no longer here, but we have even put a cap on ourselves that we cannot borrow more than $750 million a year from commercial loans. So if you know all of these things, it's ridiculous to make an argument that the new administration has borrowed $80 billion and must be able to show some projects for it. That argument cannot hold. Now, let me give you a few statistics on Ghana's public debt. I'll share this write-up with you when we are done. Ghana's nominal debt stock statistics are as follows: 79.6 billion cedis by 2014, 100 billion cedis by 2015, 122 billion by 2016, 142 billion by 2017, 173 by 2018, 198 in the first quarter of 2019. And let me just make a quick comment about even the first quarter numbers. You'll notice that there's double counting in there. Because, for example, when we did a $3 billion Eurobond transaction, 1 billion of it is for liability management. It is to be used in swapping out some of our liabilities that are going to be matured. So assume that you have a $1 billion old liability that needs to be paid back. And we have gone to borrow 1 billion so that we'll be able to service that. That old 1 billion is part of your debt stock. It's about 5 billion cedis. When you borrow the new 1 billion, initially, it also comes to add to your debt stock another 5 billion cedis. Straight away, that's about 10 billion cedis addition to your debt stock. But by the time you get into June, where we are now, remember this is end of May figures. By the time you get into June, where you are now, and you swap out and pay, that's about how much gone off your debt stock? About 10. So for anybody who knows how all of these things are computed, who comes out to say that the new administration has borrowed 80 billion and must show projects for it, he's either being mischievous or does not understand how national accounting is done. Now, as a percentage of GDP, Ghana's debt stock to GDP are also as follows: 51.2 in 2014. These are with the rebased figures. 55.6 in 2015. 56.8 in 2016, 55.6 in 2017, 57.8 in 2018, particularly because of the financial sector bailout, and then 56.8 as at quarter 1, 2019. So where is the strange new risk of debt distress that our friends in the minority all of a sudden claim? Look at the trend over the years. If indeed they claim that we were not at a risk of debt distress in their time, how can you then sustain an argument that Akufo-Addo is borrowing beyond reasonable proportions and putting the nation at the risk of debt distress? The numbers don't support that narrative. Now, let me go into some more detail. Yes, our current debt stock, as at the last figures published by the Bank of Ghana, about 198 billion in CD terms. You take it at about 200 billion cedis even. The definition of the public debt stock is defined as the central government public debt in addition to the publicly guaranteed debt and call on contingent liabilities. Therefore, any shock that occurs on the economy away from the budget deficit will hit the debt stock. This explains the difference between the fiscal numbers and the debt stock development, because the financial sector bailout, as I mentioned, is a part of it. And if you take that out, you would notice that we have rather been bringing one of the most significant measures, which is the debt to GDP ratio. We've been bringing it down. It's only when you add the financial sector bailout that you would see that even as at now, it's 56.8, comparable to the 56.8 as at the end of 2016. Even if you include the financial sector bailout, which is an extraordinary pressure that had not been, may I say, projected on the fiscal numbers. Now, at any point in time, and here's a bit more detail, when you say you are disbursing old loans that are coming in, I've given you a few examples on it. I've given you examples on the exchange rate and how it impacts, and the documentation I'll share with you will provide you some further examples. Our conclusion is pretty simple. That the argument that the minority seeks to make, that the administration has borrowed 80 billion in new loans and therefore must show project for it is an argument that is not sustainable, because a growth in the debt stock, for anybody who understands how it's calculated, does not mean that the administration has borrowed. There are various contributing factors, and they are also very much aware that the new paradigm in which we are operating does not allow us to even on our own borrow beyond the new thresholds that we have put out there. And we encourage the general public to dismiss it as just mere political propaganda.
First quarter 2019, by way of the debt stock.
198.
198.
Yes.
Yes, that's right, 198. So can you tell us, I don't know if you've done the math cumulatively, what you've borrowed since you came, in terms of the figures, the nominal figures?
I'm responding squarely to the argument they have put out, that we have borrowed 80 billion Cedis in 2.5 years and have nothing to show for it. And we're saying that we're calling it out that it is not true. What has happened is that you see a growth in our debt stock, estimate about 80 billion. But when you see a growth in the debt stock, it does not mean that the government has borrowed. And I've been at pains to explain the various sources of the growth in debt stock. Other questions? Yes, sir. Every year you will find the cap in the budget, not more than 500 million Cedis in terms of commercial loans, 2017, I think 2018. 2019, you see not more than $750 million in commercial loans. It's all there in the budget. So it's strange for somebody to now come back, because you cannot borrow outside what you have programmed in the budget. Okay? So the attempt to suggest that about an 80 billion CD growth in the last reported figure, when you know, for example, that there's liability management that is going to come out of it, when you know the exchange differential in it, when you know the old loans that are being disbursed in it, is unsustainable. And for us, our interest is to call it out and explain as such, so that people don't go home thinking that, wow, this is true. It is not true. Okay, colleagues, thank you.